Well, so now you have completed your pre-design work and done some very nice program analysis and consideration of how you're going to go about this design project. Now it's time to actually design the design project. And that, of course, you've heard of schematic design. This is schematic design. And the first step in schematic design is choosing a building. And I think all of you had some very nice ideas about the types of buildings that you wanted to use as an ideal building. And of course, you all did some nice program analysis. And as I might have mentioned, I prefer when you do the program analysis on its own without the kind of, I don't know, ins and outs that typically bog you down when you have an actual building. And many of you said I'd prefer a U-shaped building or a whatever, square-shaped building. And now is the time where you can choose. And I have posted three different options: an L-shaped model, a sort of T-shaped model, and a U-shaped model on Canvas. Now, of course, I mentioned that if you have some other shape of building, other actual building that you would prefer, I am perfectly fine with that. Just be aware that we do have a short summer semester, it takes some time to put together a new building model from plans and elevations or whatever you can get. But that said, just let me know as soon as possible if you'd prefer to use your own building. Anyway, once you have chosen a building, and of course that's based on your ideal building and also your bubble diagram, your program analysis. If your program analysis sort of ends up looking like an L-shaped building or a T-shaped building, well, that would tell you I better choose a T-shaped building. If it looks like something different, obviously, then you wouldn't choose those. And there's many different ways that people can kind of jump into space planning, but the easiest I find is take a screenshot or save an image of the floor plan for your chosen building and pop it into Illustrator. It looks like most of you are doing your bubble diagrams in Illustrator, and then literally move around your bubbles, turn them into blocks just by kind of editing them. And that should allow you to kind of convert your plan to something that you can, or convert your bubbles into a floor plan. So be sure to save that block diagram, post it for some comments, and you can simultaneously continue on and start developing the actual plan itself, which is to say adding in some walls, doors, and any other types of elements: screen walls, interior windows, glass walls, any of that sort of interior fit and finish, and then post that draft floor plan. Don't need any furniture just yet, unless, of course, you feel that you need the furniture to help you lay out the spaces. In my assignment description, I do mention that I really think it's very important that you start with a notion of a simple circulation pattern. And I have mentioned to several of you, several times actually, that clarifying your circulation pattern is really important in the early design phases. If you don't start with a simple circulation pattern, you won't end up with one, or it's highly unlikely. So anyway, but once you've gotten some good feedback and gotten some comments, then I would say just start jumping right in and adding in furniture, testing out your design ideas to make sure that the spaces you're developing can accommodate them. So for example, if one of your ideas is, I really like the idea of, I don't know, having families spend time in the rooms, cooking each other meals, and sharing meals, well, first of all, you'll want to make sure there's somewhere they can prepare a meal. So, and I believe as part of the architectural program, which is on Canvas, there is a family kitchen. Make sure that that works. Is there enough space for more than one person to work? Are there stoves and sinks and refrigerators that are separated by enough space so that people can move around? Is there a work table? Is the lighting adequate? And then, can you bring that meal into a room? Are there rolling tables so that the patient can possibly share, although frequently the patients are not eating at this stage? And certainly, is there somewhere for people to literally just put their plates down, sit down with a plate? Whatever those criteria are, just make sure you show enough in your plans as the schematic design develops, that you can indicate how these spaces are used. Now, that's the main thing. We design for people generally, although sometimes we don't, but most of the time we do. We have already looked at the basic kind of summary architectural program earlier that just kind of talks about the main categories of spaces in our project. Now let's take a look at the detailed architectural program. And I'm not going to go through every single space, but there should be enough information here, hopefully, that you can kind of add it all up as far as what you should have in each space. Now, this program is actually taken from the Kaplan House Center in Peabody, so the number of residence suites is probably going to be variable depending on which building you choose. Each one is slightly different size. But typically the students have been able to get around 12. The goal is to get as many resident rooms as possible. And what you'll see is that kind of proportionally, if you have 12 resident suites, you're going to have a certain amount of support space for those. The sort of gross for the resident suites is about 6,300 or 6,800 square feet. So the suite support is about a third of that. And then there's a number of other things. There's community space. Again, about 12 units. You're going to have about a third of the area those require be dedicated for community space. This also breaks down a lot of the staff support spaces. What's nice about this program is this is a real architectural program stolen from real architects. They were very kind in sharing with us. And so it does have a lot of information about each programmatic element. Some of them obviously are probably a little more detailed than we're going to be getting to. But ideally you would have all of these spaces. Now, some of these spaces, like the internal services, you can just kind of lump those into one area. I don't actually need to see like a 36 square foot janitor's closet unless for some reason that is critical to your design. So show lots of people in your drawings, and when you do get to the stage where you have developed your spaces enough, added in any ceiling or wall or floor treatments, for example, dropped ceilings or recesses in walls or windows, that kind of thing, then it's time to do a draft rendering. Now, at this stage, I'm not really all that interested in materials. I think that gets, unless it's absolutely important to your design concepts, I feel like talking about the spaces, the spatial configuration of the rooms you're creating. Are they tall, thin spaces? Are they short, wide spaces? Are there spaces that are connected to each other visually? Or are they all just separate little boxes kind of lined up in a block fashion? That's what I'm more concerned about in this stage. So I would ask that you render your drawings. You can use Revit, or you can use Enscape, or whichever software you prefer. SketchUp, of course. But however you do it, render it in black and white. Just leave it in black and white. And I believe all those programs will allow you to get a basic rendering even without a whole heck of a lot of lighting, although Revit in particular is picky about having some lighting in there. You can also convert the model to SketchUp if you want, although I suspect at this stage most of you have abandoned SketchUp for the power of Revit. I don't actually really care, and if you prefer drawing by hand, go ahead and do it. That is absolutely fine. No points will be taken off for choosing one media over another. Also, I will take points off if the design is not well considered. I believe here this is the assignment description, and my grading criteria. Basically, what I'm looking for, what I'm hoping for, is that you come up with some ideas, these terms of criticism and these concepts, and that you find some way to work those into a design. Now, It helps if the terms of criticism are clear, and it helps if the concepts are valuable and relate to your project. I am perfectly happy if people decide as they are going along in the design, say, this concept about transformation or whatever it is isn't quite working for me. I want to modify it. That is absolutely fine. The design process is not linear per se for most of us. It is more like a spiral or a circle that goes around and around and around. So absolutely change that. So let's take a look at some of the plans. And first of all, the site that we're going to use is this place, Eastview at Middlebury. It's up in Vermont. It's very nice. I'll post a link to the page. And it's one of these facilities that you'll see that's very common. There are individual types of cottages, there's apartments, there's residential care, and then they have memory care. They have a very nice building at the center of their kind of campus. And that building is the L-shaped building, or at least part of that building is the L-shaped building that was created a few years back by another student who was doing this summer studio. And you're welcome to use that two-story. That's a two-story L-shaped building. I have also used a one-story U-shaped building and a one-story T-shaped building. They're actually very similar. Let's take a look at those. Here is the Eastview, partial Eastview model, and this is actually what is there. And you can see that it's a multi-story building, and so you've got 2 floors to work with. I believe currently the entry is kind of on part of one wing, but you can choose, in all of these, you can choose to place the entry where you think it will be most valuable. In this particular building, if you want to remove part of the second floor to create a multi-height space, I know several of you have shown images of multi-height spaces for entry lobbies or whatever, library spaces. That's perfectly fine. Again, you'd want to consider where that is. You'll also want to consider, I think most of you have considered having outdoor spaces or at least access to a healing garden through visual connection. Where's that going to go? Obviously, in this case, if your entry is right here in the middle, the healing garden might not be best on this side of the facility. Whereas if we go to this is the T-shaped building, the healing garden may be in pieces. There may be a healing garden here and here, just depending on how you arrange your patient rooms. And then here is the U-shaped building. These are both single-story buildings. These last two also have a double height kind of space. Again, these buildings are, these in particular are not actually at the site right now, but we will swap out the existing one if you'd prefer these. And again, if you've got a different site in mind, you like where your precedent is or something like that, of course, we can go with that. But the north-south orientation is as these buildings are drawn, okay? And the Revit models, I think, are okay, but I'm sure I will hear from you all very quickly if the Revit models are not quite up to snuff. Some of them are a little old. Again, feel free to try one out and see if your program actually fits in it and fits in it in a way that you're anticipating. If not, by all means, try one of the other buildings. It can't hurt, and you can always just try it on paper. There's no requirement that you do your block diagrams on the computer. Again, my only concern is can whatever process works for you and comes up with a good end result. And we just have a couple of weeks for these schematic designs. I cannot emphasize enough to you all that this stage we're not about the sort of high level of detail. What direction is the fabric pattern going on that couch? I'm not quite as concerned about that, but instead, should you be having a couch versus a love seat versus a single seat? Those are the types of discussions we should be having at this stage. And that's why I'm asking you just to render both the floor plan and the perspective views in black and white. And there you go. Good luck with your schematic designs. I'm really looking forward to it. You've all expressed a lot of really interesting ideas so far, and I'm confident that these are going to be some fun designs.